Truck Parking Club is a network of instantly reservable daily and monthly truck parking locations throughout the U.S. Truck Parking Club helps connect truckers to truck parking locations throughout the U.S. via truckparkingclub.com. Our networks is made up of property owners that have locations adequate for truck parking to list on the platform. This includes trucking companies, storage companies, CDL schools, trailer leasing companies, real estate investors, truck parking operators, and more. Go to truckparkingclub.com today. If you're a driver looking for a new trucking job, check out NCI. NCI offers the following: new Kenworth T680s, competitive wages, solo, team, and students welcome, plus a full benefit package for you and your family. Check them out today at 888-311-7076. That's 888-7076. And tell them Talk CDL sent you.
Attention trucking companies and truck drivers. If you need help with cash flow, we've got help on the way. Turn to Tab Bank, the bank that knows trucking. Tab Bank has been in the business of helping truck drivers and trucking companies with their cash flow needs for 25 years. It's just that simple. It's what they do, but they don't stop there. Tab Bank helps grow your business with their invoice, factoring, and banking services. What a plus that is. Before you book your next load, play it safe and contact Tab Bank to get their help with your factoring needs. Tab Bank helps determine the credit worthiness of your customers as well as billing and collection efforts on invoices that you factor with them. Let the experts at Tab Bank get you cash quickly for the loads you deliver. Again, it's what they do. Visit tabbank.com/TalkCDL to learn more. That's tabbank.com/TalkCDL. Tab Bank member FDIC.
So a driver called me the other day.
Oh, yeah? What did he have to say?
Well, he was kind of saying a lot. He was a driver that couldn't get a job. He was out of, I think he was in Kansas area. And he was telling me how he works. He'll drive a seasonal job. Now, I don't know if it was grain hopper or whatever he was doing, but the job lasts 4 to 8 weeks, right? And then he stays home for the year.
Is that even seasonal? 4 to 8 weeks of work?
Yeah. Well, there's some companies, actually, it's a good question. There's some jobs out there where a truck driver can make good money, but it only lasts 1, 2, 3 months, maybe harvest time or, just certain things that only come seasonal. And it doesn't even have to be a crop. It could be something else, but they go to this every year and they'll work 2-3 months. And then, what a lot of them do is they'll have this seasonal job. And then what they'll do is go to another job that they work also, for the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But this particular driver, for the last 3 years, maybe even 4, his deal was he would work for 2-3 months, and then he would just sit at home the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. So he says to me, I got to do something. I got to get back to work because we're have no money. And of course, I feel bad for anybody that isn't surviving. And he said they're behind on bills, and I guess probably him and his wife are fighting over this.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, what are the numbers?
Stress.
Right, the number 1 and number 2 reasons for divorce is money and sex, believe it or not, and money being number 1. And so he says to me, I'm really trying. And I said, what do you mean? Well, I've been trying, I guess what he was referring to is, I think his wife was standing there. So I think what he was referring to is he's trying to work correctly. But for the last 4 years, he sits at home all year.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to him, listen, to be honest with you, I heard enough. And I'm like, dude, there's no reason a Class A CDL driver should be sitting at home, for 10 months of the year, 9 months of the year. Okay. Especially if you're getting behind on your bills.
Yeah, it's not like he's one of those ice road truckers or something like that,
Well, bottom line is you can't just look for these temp jobs. I call them temp jobs.
That's pretty much what it is. 6 to 8 weeks of work, 2 months.
2 to 3 months. And so I said to him, dude, you're not, the reason he had called me, he was asking me advice because nobody will hire him. And that's why I kind of got a little testy with him. I said, dude, why would a trucking company hire you if you show that you can last 8 to 10 weeks at a job and then sit home? And obviously it looks like you'll be going back to your temp job. What if they hire you, you're only going to quit. I said, most trucking companies are not going to give you a chance because you're not a proven driver.
Right. You haven't shown that, what's the word? Stability, that.
Yeah.
What companies look for. Someone that's stable in their job.
Well, I think the average cost to hire a driver these days is $5,000 to $10,000. Maybe more. And if you're going to be a driver that job hops, and look, I know that there's a lot of bad companies out there to where you go, if you're not making money, you got to leave. But in this particular situation, you're purposely staying home for 9 months of the year, 10 months of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to him, dude, honestly, no, you look like a driver that's going to run and quit right away when your temp job comes back. You have not shown that you can stay. What you're showing everybody is that you literally are lazy. I said, do you want the truth? I said, you're showing when a trucking company looks at you, the first thing they're thinking is this guy's lazy. He's sitting at home for 9, 10 months of the year.
That's what I get.
Right. And I thought he'd hang up on me at that point. And I said, dude, I'm just telling you in all honesty what they see.
Mm-hmm.
You know what he said to me? I needed to hear that.
Good.
Exactly. He said, I really needed to hear that. I said, well, then go prove yourself, dude. I mean, somebody hopefully will pick you up, but you need to force yourself to stay there. Pay your bills. Take care of your family, man. I mean, a Class A CDL driver, truck drivers have the ability to make a good living. You should not be behind on your bills. Now, I'm not saying that we haven't seen hard times in the last couple of years.
Right.
But this guy is particularly he's purposely staying home. He's purposely staying home after he goes to work for 2 months, 3 months, running whatever the harvest is or whatever the, seasonal thing that he's hauling. I didn't really get into that because when I heard him explaining what he's doing, I thought, dude, your problem is even if you do that, I know truckers that have the seasonal job, but they also have another job that they work all year, and they have an arrangement that when the season comes, they're going to go do this because they make really good money in those couple months, and then they go back to their normal regular job. That's what he's missing, the normal regular job, and that's what's killing him.
Well, I think a lot of drivers also, like this driver here specifically, doesn't think about the fact that right now with these trucking companies, their insurance is basically stating if they don't have enough drive time in a 3-year span, 2-year span. They have to have, I think it's 2 years. In a 2-year span, they have to have so much driving.
Correct.
Well, he's not hitting that.
He's not hitting that either.
Right.
But mainly what they're looking at is this is a guy that's not going to come and stay.
Right. He has no stability, but he also isn't hitting that time frame, and he's not going to get a job.
Right. Yeah. So, but anyway, so guys, you got to stick it out. Okay. If you're at a job right now, especially in these times, you got to stick it out. And that's really what companies are looking at. They're looking at drivers that are stable. Okay. Just thought I would share that with you guys this morning, and time to move on.
Moving on.
Let's get a quick break, and let's get on with this show. Got some interesting stuff to talk about today. For over 20 years, Sumar Financial has been a trusted partner for owner-operators and small carriers, providing fast, flexible, and transparent freight factoring solutions that keep businesses rolling. Here's why truckers choose Sumar. Number 1, same-day payments. Number 2, if a broker doesn't pay, Sumar takes the loss. Zero risk for you. Number 3, no reserve plan. Get all your money up front with no hidden final payouts. Number 4, no long-term commitment. Try Sumar with no minimum volume requirements or long-term contracts. Number 5, fuel card program with top savings. The best network in the country, flexible payment methods, and IFTA support. With fast, hassle-free payments, technology-driven solutions, dedicated account executives, no surprises, no hidden fees. Trust Sumar Financial to get your invoices paid today. And when we say paid today, we mean paid today. For more information and to learn about Sumar, go to landings.sumar.com/talkcdl. That's landings.summar.com/talkcdl. At Spectrum Insurance and TruckingInsuranceGuy.com, we deliver fast, reliable, and affordable trucking insurance built for owner-operators and fleets alike. I used to be an owner-operator myself, so I know what matters on the road. Whether you're running cross-country routes or making local deliveries, we tailor your coverage to meet DOT requirements and keep your rig rolling. From liability and cargo to physical damage and more, we've got your back. Need a quote? Visit TruckingInsuranceGuy.com, or if you prefer to talk, call our Spectrum team for expert advice and unbeatable services at 507-884-1312. That's 507-884-1312, where there's always a human answering a phone. All right, we're back. Read an interesting article. I know you're going to be very interested in this. Okay. And it goes something like this. FMCSA is now introducing a 2-step process to determine a driver's English language proficiency. Yes, so this is really getting serious. So I don't know that the non-English speaking drivers can understand me anyways, unless they have some kind of translator. You know, they have some really good translator apps and stuff right now going on. And we're going to be mentioning that here in a second. But listen to this. You got to hear this. This is really, and I believe it's really needed. It says the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration shared updated guidance for law enforcement on how to evaluate whether a commercial vehicle driver is sufficiently fluent in English to avoid a citation or an out-of-service order. Now, this is what they're doing to try to help them also, as long as they can understand and be able to elaborate English. So, in late April, President Trump issued a executive order, EO, requiring the enforcement of existing English language proficiency called ELP, almost like ELD, but it's ELP. It says the ELP requirements for truck drivers. The EO sought to reverse a 2016 policy that stated that commercial vehicle drivers should not be placed out of order for ELP violations. So the previous, and again, I'm not trying to get political, but the previous administration made a rule that if you can't speak English, it shouldn't stop you from being a truck driver in the United States. You don't have to communicate via English. What do you think of that?
I think it's a barrier. I think that they're hindering too many people by not allowing, English is what's everything in the U.S. is posted as.
Okay. So it says, since the EO was signed, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance updated the North American standard out-of-service criteria to make an ELP violation an out-of-service offense once again effective. Now it starts June 25th. So what's it's standard when they're making a rule, they give you a warning. This is going into effect, right? So it's going into effect next month, June 25th, 2025. Now it says, on May of 2025, the FMCSA released an internal memo that provides guidance for law enforcement personnel on how to evaluate whether drivers meet ELP requirements while conducting inspections, establishing the following two-step language assessment process effective immediately. So what they're doing now is they have this two-step process to see, like if you get pulled over, all right, and Ruth Ann, you can't speak English, you're out.
I agree with that. I personally, there's too many, like I said, all of our signs, all of our updates, everything that, crash ahead, all of that stuff is in English.
So check this out. Number one will be driver interview. Now this is like, say I'm the DOT officer, right? And my lights are on. I pull you over. Go ahead, put your brakes on. Good job. All right. So I come up to speak to you, right? Hi, this is Troy with the Department of Transportation of Florida. How you doing today, miss?
Hola.
Okay, so...
That's all I know. Sorry.
Okay, so anyways, so at that point, if I determine you might not be able to, communicate here, now I do, number one, a driver interview. And then number two, a highway traffic sign recognition assessment. Okay. Now it says the policy advises FMCSA personnel to initiate all roadside inspections in English. If the inspector's initial contact with the driver indicates that the driver may not understand the inspector's initial instructions, the inspector should conduct an ELP assessment in order to evaluate the driver's compliance with 49 CFR. Now, you said you only know one word in Spanish. So if I said to you, I'd like to do an inspection on your truck, would that be all right? And then you answer,
okay.
No, you would say, hola.
No, I was going to say, sí? Hola?
No, you said you only knew one word. So if you keep saying that same word, is what I'm getting at, right?
Right.
Where are you from?
Hola.
Are you? How long have you been driving?
Hola.
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at.
Right.
So if you don't really know a lot of words, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to start this inspection. Mm-hmm. Okay. So step one, the interview, determining the driver's ability to respond sufficiently to official inquiries. Like I just started asking you and you kept going, hola, right? Now, and it's not just for Spanish speaking. This is for any foreign truck driver, all right, and that speaks a foreign language other than English. So it's really what it is. And let me, before I go on and say this, if I was a truck driver and I went over to Spain, or I went over to Greece, or I went over to Mexico, or I went over to Russia or I went anywhere to be a truck driver and they pulled me over and I couldn't speak their language. Well, actually, I probably wouldn't even get a CDL. I probably wouldn't even get past that. I doubt that they would even issue me a CDL at that point. Would you agree?
As far as I understand, other countries don't generally have their testing stuff in multiple languages like we do.
Correct. And that's very correct. Now, if for some reason I managed to get a CDL in their country and I got pulled over by one of their officers, I can assure you that if I couldn't speak their language, I might be A, kicked out of the truck, B, sent to jail. I don't know, but I know this, they wouldn't be as inviting as we are in the United States. And I'm not putting down foreigners, okay, in any way, because most of our relatives have come over. My grandmother came over from Italy on the boat, so I'm not, I'm not an advocate for kicking people out if they're here legally. And I'm not an advocate for stopping a foreigner from being a truck driver if he can communicate, just like the law is wanting to uphold. Okay? Now, I got to find my place here where I was just at. It says the inspector should evaluate the ability to respond sufficiently to the official inquiries and directions in English as required by 49 CFR 391.11. Now, here's what it says. It says, because the driver interview is a means of establishing the driver's ability to respond to official inquiries by speaking English sufficiently, the inspector should inform the driver that the driver should respond to the inspector in English. So we're going to start out by saying, Ruthann, you'll need to speak English in this whole interview, okay?
Hola.
Okay, that's hello. All right, anyways, it goes on to say, tools to facilitate such interpreters, I speak cards, cue cards, smartphone applications, and on-call telephone interpretation service should not be used during the driver interview. Now, you know what I'm talking about. There's apps you could speak in, right? And those apps will, like I could speak to you in Spanish.
Translate it for us.
Exactly. And then you hold it up and then it will repeat it back into the English language. Mm-hmm. And we've used these apps and they work really, really good.
Yeah.
But here's the question. What if you're somewhere and your phone goes dead? Right?
Right.
This is why they don't want anything like this, because what if you're in an area where you have bad phone service?
Correct.
Or your phone, like I said, goes dead. And you now don't have the means to communicate, and a DOT officer is needing to run a full inspection on you, or he has questions, or maybe you're in an accident and you don't have any answers because you don't speak English. This is really why you can't just rely on another service. And here's the other thing. I've met truck drivers that are deaf, and they have what's called a interpreter. Mm-hmm. You'll call the truck driver, and then an interpreter picks up the phone, and they say, "Hi, I'm with the driver that is deaf. I'm the interpreter. Go ahead and ask your question." So you're basically talking to the interpreter, and the interpreter is typing to the deaf person and relaying it. Works pretty good if you have good phone service. Mm-hmm. Okay. But if you were out in the desert in Arizona where there's not a lot of phone service, or you were in the mountains where there's not a lot of phone service, I can assure you, you're going to have a hard time communicating with somebody for the simple reason you don't have the service. Okay. You just don't. You want to hear a really weird story about this? We were at a bar one night when I was a kid, 21-year-old guy. It was my buddies and I, and there was a deaf guy that actually I knew, and he was a good guy. And somehow a brawl broke out outside, and one of my friends decked the deaf guy because the deaf guy was trying to point to his ears and say, "I'm deaf." When Scott walked up to him, remember Scott, my Marine friend? Mm-hmm. Scott decks him, and I go, "Scott, that's a deaf guy. You just knocked the deaf guy out." He goes, "I thought he was saying, come on." I said, "No, he was telling you he's deaf." He was just, it was crazy. And so then, and the deaf guy was cool. He understood, and he wasn't actually that mad, because of what happened. But anyways, that was a great example of communication is horrible.
Right.
The poor guy. And so going back to this, if you have any kind of translator, it will not be accepted in your interview for a DOT officer to evaluate whether you understand the commands in English, because you need to understand in your ears and you need to be able to communicate it with your mouth. Okay. It says, these tools, it says the tools may mask a driver's inability to communicate English. So, and here's the other thing. My buddy that works for the giant cement company that's worldwide. He's a supervisor that runs one of the facilities near us. He told me the other night when we were at the graduation, he said half of the drivers that come into the cement plant, he says you go to talk to them and they hand you their phone so they can talk to you that way. He said literally, at least half of these drivers cannot speak English. So that means there's a lot of drivers in Florida that are in trouble.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Again, and we're not here making fun of people.
No, I'm not making fun of them. And, Florida is a big melting pot, so we do get a lot of different...
it was funny the way you kept going, hola. But anyways.
I know more than just hola, but that's the only word I knew that was hi, and,
But
so.
anyways, what the bottom line is you can't use a machine to do this. You have to be able to do it. So it says, if the inspector determines the driver is unable to respond to official inquiries in English sufficiently, it is the policy of the FMCSA that the inspector cite the driver for a violation of 49 CFR 391.11. I'm repeating that number so people can look it up if they want to. It says there is no need to progress to step 2 if the inspector determines that the driver is unable to respond sufficiently to official inquiries as outlined in step 1 of the ELP assessment. Now, step 2, highway traffic sign recognition, which you would agree with that, right? Determining a driver's ability to understand sufficiently United States highway traffic signs, including changeable signs in the English language. Now, you know what they mean by a changeable sign.
Right, where it's like above you and it says like crash ahead or congested area or
get
something
in
like
right
that.
lane, lane merging. Right, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. So if you can't understand that, then this is what they're getting at. So it says the inspector should evaluate the driver's ability to understand sufficiently United States highway traffic signs by conducting a highway traffic sign assessment to include highway traffic signs that conform to the Federal Highway Administration's manual on uniform traffic control devices for streets and highways, the MUTCD, and electronic display changeable message signs the driver may encounter while operating a commercial motor vehicle. The memo requires that officers document evidence to support the ELP, including the driver's response of or lack of, and place the driver immediately out of service for violation of English language requirements, and when warranted, initiating an action to disqualify the driver from operating commercial motor vehicles in interstate commerce. Now, that's big, because these trucking companies that have hired the drivers that can't speak English, you might want to be careful, because if your driver gets put out, that means your load and everything is going to be sitting along with your truck, and most likely it's going to go into impound.
Correct. I would see that.
Right. I doubt that if they're disqualified, that DOT is going to keep your truck sitting there waiting for you. I'm not saying that 24 hours later it might still be there, but there's a good chance they're going to make a phone call. Truck, load, everything is going to be on its way to an impound yard that's going to start costing you daily charges.
And that's not even saying how long you get to that point. So your load's going to be late immediately while they're doing all of this. And then I'll add on the time. It might take 4 hours till they notify you that your truck's being towed to an impound yard that you're now going to have to pay for.
Correct. So my guess is you might want to yourself. This starts with the hiring, guys. Okay.
It starts at the top.
And I understand it's hard to find good drivers. It don't matter what nationality they are, American, Mexican, Russian, whatever. It's hard to find the good ones. And I know that, it's a task and companies are losing money. I get all that. But I would tell you it's going to hurt more if you get a truck impounded and your driver gets un-CDL'd, put it that way.
Well, to go with what you're saying there, I don't think they're thinking of, it's not just those, like we mentioned, you've now got to pay for your truck to be towed. You now have to pay the impound. And a lot of these companies will charge you for it being late. So now you're getting the fees from the company that you're supposed to be delivered to. They're going to charge you for every hour that that their merchandise isn't there yet. You know what I mean? That retention in a sense, but they're going to charge you for it being late. So you're adding a lot of extra cost on you.
No, that's 100% correct. There's absolutely no way you can win, and you might not even get paid if something like that does happen, because if the load's sitting there for a week or two till you get that out of there, there's a good chance you're really not going to make crap on that load. I would just tell everybody at this point, this is a real thing in front of us. And if you get caught right now with a non-English speaking driver in your truck, the only one to blame, it's not the truck driver. It's not the guy that couldn't understand English. It's the guy that hired him and the guy that failed to make it right. Okay, get him into an English-speaking class if you want to keep the guy. But the bottom line is, okay, you, trucking company owner, if you're hiring these guys and they are not meeting the ability to display English-speaking skills and they get put out of service or they lose their CDL and your truck gets impounded, don't blame them.
No, you kept them because they're a good worker. We're not saying that they're not good workers. We're saying that they need to comply with the rest of the rules and regulations, and that's where you have to step in. And like you said, if they're that good of a worker and you want to keep them, train them, work with them with the U.S. Language. Work with them to speak English, Hey, let me tell you something. Some of the best workers I've ever worked with were Mexicans. And I mean that sincerely. When I was a casket hauler and I went down to San Antonio, all those areas down there, most of those warehouses were mainly Mexicans working in it. And those guys can unload a full casket trailer in less than 45 minutes. And with my help, it was amazing. They were awesome. So look, we're not in any way saying that they're not good people, that they're not good workers. We're just saying with this new law, be careful, because there's a new sheriff in town and they're cracking down on this stuff and it's real. Don't pretend it's not real, and don't pretend that it can't, that you can't get your truck impounded. That's really all I wanted to say about on that subject, Ruth. And there was one last thing that it did say. I actually wanted to read that because it says the memo provides an exemption for drivers operating commercial motor vehicles in commercial zones along the U.S.-Mexican border, noting that these drivers should not be cited for ELP violations, but not placed out of service or disqualified from operating commercial vehicles. So my guess is, because you have a lot of Mexican drivers that bring the freight over, correct,
for the American drivers to take, up north.
Right. Certain companies, I'm going to use an example like U.S. Express, Sierra England, some of those bigger companies. Correct. They have contracts with freight that comes from the other countries.
Car parts, whatever,
right.
Yeah.
And they have to pull them up. And then since they don't have the drivers go into the other country, they have it to where they have that meeting spot and they pick it up in that area, distribution center or something.
Right. Most American truckers don't want to, go down past the border. And so they have the arrangement of Mexican national drivers bringing the freight across. So those guys, you guys don't have anything to worry about. That whole zone down there, okay, it's the drivers that are going above the zone. So I would imagine if you're pulled over, from, I don't know, Laredo down, maybe, I don't know, somewhere in that area might be the zone. But if you're pulled over in that area, you probably don't have a problem, with being out of service or even checked for English speaking ability, because it's already set up that that those drivers are definitely needed.
Right.
Yeah. So, but anyways, that's pretty much my podcast for the week, Ruth Ann. I seen that article and I thought, man, that's really some really good information. And, and I hope it actually helps the drivers that are having a hard time, because, you don't want to see these guys get, have a lot of trouble. Maybe it'll encourage some of them to go ahead and start, learning the language a little better, and at least to the point where they can communicate. You don't have to be the perfect English speaking guy, but, learn the language and then keep your job. That's all I can say, Ruth Ann. Moving on. Actually, you have the word of the day, or?
I do.
What do you got today for us? Is it a good one?
Well, I think it is.
And, I always like to announce, sometimes I forget to mention Word Genius. They're not a sponsor of the show, but it's a free app. You can download it, and they'll send you, I don't know if it's at least one word every day, Ruth Ann, maybe more.
Yeah, I'll get one word, and then every now and then I'll get like some other type of grammar. Like they'll say something.
Yeah, and it'll give you a word, and if you remember the word, it makes you smarter. Anyway, so what do you got for us today? You ready?
Singultus.
Do it again.
Singultus.
Singultus?
Singultus.
Interesting. Never heard that one before. So tell us what singultus means, Ruth Ann.
Hiccups.
Hiccups?
Mm-hmm. Hiccups.
I think I'd rather use the word hiccups.
The point is to make it more universal and make it sound like you're smarter.
Singultus?
Yes. I get singultus every time I drink sparkling wine.
Is that Spanish? Singultus? Or is that like
Latin?
Latin, I was going to say, yeah. Interesting. Well, thank you for the new word genius, and Ruth Ann.
Sure.
All right, we're out of here.
Peace.
Peace. Praise the Lord.